that's going. That's good. That needs to record too. Audio backup. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a Sonic Talk special. That's right, this is one of those ones that we do from time to time, usually to cover me being on holiday. But by a happy accident, we've also means we've got the presence of a fantastic guest who I will tell you about shortly. But just want to say thank you very much to iZotope for sponsoring the show, of course. We will have details of a competition that you can win a copy of Break Tweaker. Obviously, I can't announce the winner of any other competitions because I don't know when this is going to go out. So that's just going to be the way it is. But thank you very much. And there's no live chat room. This is all pre-recorded, but I can assure you it's live and direct. And look who I've got here. I've got Mr. Roger Linn of Roger Linn Design. You must know who Roger Linn is. How are you, Roger?
I'm very well, thank you.
I'm very glad to hear that. Right, Roger, of course, you must get a bit sick of being called the grandfather or the father of drum machines and MPCs and stuff, but it's true, isn't it? It's just one of those things you've got to have to learn to live with, I guess.
Oh, I don't mind it. It's wonderful, actually. Often customers write in, and currently I do all my own tech support. So customers write in, and we have wonderful conversations, and often they'll tell me about things they did with some of my earthly products, and it's very nice to hear.
Excellent. Well, Roger, one of the reasons you're here is because a couple of episodes ago we were talking about the Linnstrument, because periodically what you're working on at the moment is this kind of multi-touch, new thought on how to control and be expressive. And we talked a little bit about it, and you got in touch and said, I think I need to tell you a bit more about it, because obviously we were clearly underinformed, or at least I was. But I mean, aside from all of that stuff, I mean, this has been a very long project for you, isn't it? I mean, this is kind of something that you've been working on for quite some time. And I was reading a little bit about it. I mean, tell us a little bit about where this came from and why you felt there was a need for it, because I guess your background previously has been, in terms of interface, has been pad based, and you might get pressure sensitivity, and that's kind of it. There's not really been any keyboard stuff. So tell me where did it come from?
Well, first I want to say, Nick, that you're not misinformed, and you've always been great about your reporting on electronic music products, much more than other people. You always seem to really understand it very, very well, and that's very, very nice, because often people will write wrong things about products with no bad intentions, but I do appreciate the fact that you do research properly. And it's just that this thing here, I was mainly saying not that you were misinformed, but rather that people in general, it's a new idea, and it's very helpful when somebody like yourself is able to explain these things in a better way. So I appreciate that. But anyway, regarding the long time it took to do Linnstrument, I first released a video about 4 years ago of an early prototype of Linnstrument. And the whole idea of it is a multi-touch surface that senses 3 dimensions of movement with the finger, kind of like what acoustic instruments do, like a violin or something like that. But at the time, I was using a commercial evaluation unit of a technology from a company called TouchCo. And I was thinking about just using their technology as the touch surface for Linnstrument. And then the Amazon company bought them and shut them down. So they basically took away what I was going to use as my touch surface for this. And so that was after I made the video. So without a touch surface, I decided to make my own, because no one else made such a touch surface. And it turns out it's a very, very difficult thing to do. It's like making a touch screen that's pressure sensitive, and it's not easy. And it took me about 4 years to get it right. But the good news is that what I've come up with here, the design I have, is a whole lot better than what TouchCo had anyway for musical purposes. So it took a long time, but I think it's worth the wait.
Wow, I mean, so that's I like the idea of that. It's almost kind of like if they don't if they don't build it anymore, you have to build. So you're back to basics. I mean, I'm guessing you've got a background in engineering, design. So I mean, it's not a completely unexplored area for you, but that must have been quite a challenge.
Well, it is. The truth is, I have no education in engineering. Actually, all I have is a high school degree. I never finished college. So uh, but when you're really interested in something, it's easy to learn. You're driven by your own passions, and I've always been passionate about both music and about technology, and putting those together has always been the combination, of my two strong interests. So I always focus on the goal. I try to make an instrument that I would like to have, and fortunately, the things that I like to have are things that some people at least would like to have as well. So it works out well for me. So
Well,
it's one of those things where the necessity is the mother of invention.
gotcha. I understand. I mean, one of the things that we've gone, because we've seen this notion of, I mean, it's not the only touch interface concept out there. Perhaps it was the first one, and obviously that delay that you had, because there was obviously the Eigen Labs guys who were using keys and what have you. I mean, the one thing that I've found just with playing that kind of stuff is it's actually quite challenging. And you didn't go for the keyboard layout; you went for something kind of the grid. Was that always your intention, or is that something that came by design?
Well, one thing I'd say first of all is that there are four other instruments that do this, what I call polyphonic multidimensional controllers, or PMCs, not to be confused with MPCs. And but where we all owe a great debt of gratitude is to Lippold Hawken, who first
Yes.
released his Continuum in 1999. This is quite a long time ago, 15 years ago, and that really speaks very highly of his forward thinking. And then before that, there were of course monophonic expression instruments like the Iwi from Niles Steiner, who then made it with Akai, and Yamaha had some wonderful wind instruments as well. And then Don Buchla had interesting interfaces that were multidimensional in his Thunder controller. So there were a lot of things leading up to this, but I think what Lippold did starting in 1999 was to introduce the idea of a polyphonic multidimensional controller and something that you could actually play notes and chords on. And then, we're all catching up to Lippold, I think, and trying our own versions of that. But anyway, as it comes down to the idea of laying out the notes in a grid, the problem with a keyboard is, and I could have laid out the Linnstrument notes in a keyboard layout. I actually planned to have a keyboard layout version. But the problem with it is, and this is described on my site, is that when you want to do these bends between notes, which are very important for guitar, pedal steel, harmonica, even wind instruments and such, you want to bend from one note to another.
Right.
And the trouble with a piano keyboard is those bends just go all over the place. If you're bending from C to C sharp, you have to bend in a diagonal direction. If you're bending from C to D, you're bending you're moving your finger in a horizontal direction. If you want to go from C, a minor third, up to E flat, you have to do a sort of a zigzag motion.
Mm.
Now, it makes it very, very difficult. And so I favored the idea of a layout of notes similar to any stringed instrument. And what is that? It's a grid. Any stringed instrument is basically multiple rows
Right.
of evenly spaced semitones. And it really lends itself much, much better than a piano key layout to doing those sorts of expressive bends. And even a guitarist will bend up a whole tone and then vibrato around there. So it works out much, much better. And you can see from the videos on my site how it does those sorts of things. Now, that said, I have to say that the Rolly Seaboard is a wonderful instrument, and they've worked around those limitations in an excellent way, as best as you can do in a keyboard layout. So I'm not bashing the keyboard layout. And the other thing too is that that's what everybody already plays.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I guess the difficulty is obviously when you've got people. I mean, generally, keyboard players are the people that are kind of immersed in the technology and
yes.
and MIDI and that side of things. So therefore, the interface of their choice is going to be keyboard based. But actually, as you say, the stringed instrument layout for expressivity makes an awful lot of sense in terms of the execution of it. So it's a tricky one. I always wondered about that, about the opportunity, the possibility of actually creating a left hand right hand thing, so you can have your keys, from your MIDI input or whatever, and then using. I think I discussed this on the show when we were talking about the notion of Linnstrument and other multi dimensional controllers, of having a hand that would do the control and a hand that would do the playing, so you could kind of work in two ways. Is that something you explored as well?
Well, that's the existing metaphor or method of doing it. If you're playing a MIDI keyboard, you select your notes with the on-off switches of a MIDI keyboard, and then you add the variable element by moving a pitch bend wheel or a mod wheel with your left hand. The trouble with it is as I write on my site, if you've ever tried to play a convincing jazz saxophone solo or a clarinet or a violin, you know that it just doesn't work. It sounds like a sampler playing those sounds, or a synthesizer just playing it. And the problem is that ultimately the MIDI keyboard is just a series of on-off switches. And if you take that by comparison to an instrument like a violin, you're able to control 3 parameters at once while you're playing the note. You can change the loudness of the note over time, you can change the pitch of the note over time, and you can change the timbre of the note, for example, by whether you bow near the bridge or near the neck. And so those things are all controlled at the same time, and that's what makes a violin such an expressive instrument, for example. Right. And if you're working with synthesis, that's what can make synthesis such an expressive sound. And so what I'm doing is I'm saying, if you look historically at instruments, what has made musical performances that people agree over centuries are beautiful and endearing to us all as listeners is this ability to control these 3 parameters at once: loudness, pitch, and timbre. And so if you also want, though, but those have all been monophonic instruments, if you also want the polyphony of a keyboard, the only way to do that is to control those 3 parameters with 1 finger. And fortunately, in this particular universe, there are 3 dimensions. So you use the pressure to control the loudness, left-right motion to control pitch, and the forward-backward movement to control timbre. And so it works out to be really the only way you can do that and still maintain polyphony.
Yes, I see what you're saying. So have you got perhaps...
And let me just finish on that, because you were saying, why not just separate out the nuances from the note selection mechanism as on a MIDI keyboard? And the reason is because it just doesn't work very well. First of all, that means you can only play 1 note at a time expressively, and you can't control things independently. But it also means that in all great expressive acoustic instruments, the note selection mechanism is tightly integrated into the expressive mechanism. In other words, if you're playing a guitar, you play the note and you wiggle the note to vibrato it, or you play the note and you slide your finger to vibrato it. You don't have a separate mechanism. Well, for example, you do on a guitar, you can use the whammy bar to do vibrato, but it really doesn't work the same. I mean, the parts of music that we really love are seeing a guitarist who plays those notes and wiggles them and slides them and does hammer-ons and slurs, or a violin player that does the vibratos and the glissandi, and all those nuances that we've come to love are ones in which the instrument tightly integrates the note selection mechanism with the expression mechanism.
Right.
So it really works much better to do that.
So you have essentially we have a mechanical connect between the whole thing, so that the whole thing has a. So how does the layout of the Linnstrument work in terms of in terms of note selection and what have you? I mean, that's the thing that I've been curious about, because with all grid systems, there's an ability to kind of do a lot of things in note clusters and chords, but it really depends on how you array. Is there a standard that you're adhering to? You know, like Push uses a particular method, and then there's there are various other keyboards that do. You know, so how did you choose that? Did you use an existing one, or perhaps you could explain how it's laid out on the Linnstrument itself? Because I know you've got one with you, right?
Yeah, actually, it was one right here.
Oh, as if by magic.
The way it works is all the rows are chromatic notes. And you actually can't hear that now, can you?
I can hear it a little bit. Yes, I can actually.
Okay, then that's good. So, and then the interval between the rows is kind of like the tuning of the instrument, as in a guitar. For example, right now this is tuned to all musical fourths.
So like E, A, D, G. So it's like the guitar strings, effectively.
Well, like the 4 bottom strings of a guitar.
Right.
But if I want, I can select here guitar tuning, and I can put it right into guitar tuning. Me personally, I prefer all fourths, because then that makes the layout isomorphic. That means when I play a chord, it will be the same fingering, or I play a scale, it'll be the same fingering no matter where I play across the keyboard. But I suspect a lot of guitar players will tune it to guitar, cellists or violinists will tune it to fifths, and so on and so forth.
Oh, I see. So the paradigm of having a string and then the intervals, that's very much so. Yeah, I see. That makes an awful lot of sense when you look at it that way. So, and I guess if you go for the isomorphic feel, then you can translate those skills to other instruments, like we say, such as push and whatever. So, are the individual rows? Are they individual channels of aftertouch or layer? I mean, how does that part of it work? Because presumably if you play two notes together on the same string effectively, do you still get the polyphonic expression, or does it have to be across strings?
Well, there are three different MIDI modes. By default, it just sends everything on a single channel, so that it works with any MIDI synth. And one way to think of Linnstrument is it's just basically like an expressive alternative to a standard MIDI keyboard controller.
Right.
It doesn't make any sound. It only puts out MIDI. But the problem, of course, with MIDI is the pitch bend information always applies to all notes.
Yeah.
And so you can only have one pitch bend for all notes. So in this basic single channel method, whenever you slide your finger left or right, it's putting out pitch bend information.
Ah, okay.
But the trouble with that is, of course, you can't hold one note and then play another note and
It's
have
pedal
it be
steel or
a
whatever
different
that
bend.
yeah.
So the second MIDI mode is channel per note, and that puts out every note on its own MIDI channel, and so it has independent pitch bend that way. And it works great with Logic Pro and a number of other synthesizers, but not with all, because most MIDI synthesizers accept everything just on a single MIDI channel. But when you use this channel per note mode, then if I play one note, it'll be on, say, channel 1, and if I play a second note and bend it, it'll be on channel 2, and the bends for channel 2 will only affect the note that's on channel 2. And that's how I did, for example, the pedal steel guitar sound on the video on my website and some of the others.
So in that way, I mean, it's actually very, very simple. It's just a simple, in terms of if you were designing a new VSTI or a new virtual instrument, just being able to recognize channeling information coming in on note. I mean, it could still play the same. Does it require a lot of modification? I mean, I'm guessing you probably have had to discuss this with people who are making instruments to sort of see how your instrument could interact with what's currently out there. Is it a big deal? Or I mean, because I always wondered how that was possible, but it seems when you explain it that way, quite straightforward.
Well, so far I haven't talked too much with the other developers about it, because Logic Pro X already works great in channel per note mode, and also there's a number of other synths like Spectrasonics Trillion and Spectrasonics Omnisphere.
Mm-hmm.
They both work in multi-channel mode in the same way. So, and there's a number of others too. And not only that, but I stay in contact with the other makers of these polyphonic multidimensional controllers, like Roland Lamb, who makes the Seaboard, or
Sure.
Rippled Hawkins, who makes the Continuum, or Randy Jones, who makes the Soundplane, or John Lambert, who makes the Eigenharp. And so we're all working together to make sure that we implement things in the same way, and it becomes easy for people to support.
Ah, okay.
And basically, more and more synths are coming online all the time to this polyphonic mode. But that said, much of the time when you're doing this sort of expressive playing, you are doing solo work. So the single channel mode works actually very, very well. Right. As exemplified in this, here's a clarinet sound. So I'm actually getting 3 dimensions of movement, but for any sort of acoustic instrument, like a wind instrument like that, you've got to understand that the intent is to actually have a monophonic instrument.
Right.
And by the way, the sound you just heard, if you can hear it, is from this Italian company called Sample Modeling, and it just makes this perfect fit for an instrument. It gives you perfect acoustic performances of clarinet, oboe, or ranges of saxes, flute, trombone, trumpet, French horn.
Is that modeled stuff? Is that rather than sampled based?
Well, they call it sample modeling, and it's a marvelous technology. They start with samples, but then they break it down into descriptors, and then they're able to manipulate those descriptors in real time and reassemble it when it's played in real time as you need it. And in doing so, you can do all things like pitch slides and vibratos, and you never get any of that Munchkinization. And the beauty of it, the sample modeling instruments are all monophonic, but it turns out that's actually what you want.
Is that these guys?
Yes, that's them.
All right.
It's samplemodeling.com.
Yeah, I got you. That sounds.
just to want to finish this point, a big part of what makes those acoustic instruments sound realistic is the transitions between
Yeah.
monophonic notes. So it's how you play. If you're playing along and you finger the note on a clarinet or a sax to another note, what makes it sound realistic is those transitions between notes. And so it actually sounds more realistic if it's monophonic than if it's polyphonic.
Okay. I,
And then that works great with Linnstrument's single channel mode.
right, I've got you. I was always curious. So, are you using pitch bend because of the higher resolution? Because I always wondered about the concept of taking, you got your note trigger, then all the individual axes you add would be, and you could use aftertouch or polyphonic aftertouch, was an existing on different channels, so you could use it that way. Or does that not give you enough resolution?
Actually, it works fine. What we're trying to do is use all the existing standards. As I say, Linnstrument is really just a replacement for an expressive replacement for any MIDI keyboard controller. So, in the same way that a MIDI keyboard controller can put out aftertouch for the pressure information of the instrument, I can put out aftertouch or poly aftertouch, or send pressure information as control change 11, which is expression. And then for pitch bend, all synths want to see the note change, the pitch change with pitch bend messages.
Mm-hmm.
So I use pitch bend messages for that.
Right.
And then for the third dimension of timbral control, I follow either the standard set by Continuum, which is a controller 74, or controller 1, the mod wheel.
That's interesting. So, I'm curious to how when you slide, you're sliding from a particular point. So I'm starting on this note, I'm sliding here, then I'm going to go hit another note. There must be some quite clever sort of maths and interpolation, so that when you then hit a new note, it's on pitch rather than having to reset itself and sliding back down again. I mean, those are the sort of challenges that you're having to kind of deal with in terms of the nuts and bolts programming for how the sensors react and work.
Yeah, well, one of the great things you can do, one of the great reasons about electronic instruments as opposed to acoustic instruments is the ability to correct pitch, of course. Now, I play guitar and mandolin, and I love the fact that there are frets there, but I don't like the fact that I can't slide continuously up and down as on a violin. And so with an electronic instrument, you can have your initial pitch quantized. And then you can also quantize it when you move. If you stop moving, it says, "Oh, you stopped moving. I'd like to goose that back into pitch." So there are tricks you can do to help you, but still give you the expression that you want from an instrument like a violin.
Yeah, and one of the things that I found, because I tried to play, I think it was the Eigen Pico, which is it has multi-axis. But I found the problem I found with that or any other instrument so far is, as soon as you start to touch it, it's very difficult to. It needs to be really highly set up to your touch, because quite often what you might do is you might touch it and then you'll fit, because of the level of accuracy that you might have to hit a button, the pitch starts to drift. How do you handle that kind of stuff?
Well, one of the I have a Pico, and I think that the Eigenhardt products are wonderful. There is a problem though, because the way they're bending pitch is the tilt of the button, and I think it is a little bit difficult sometimes to hold that steady. Yeah, but they have some good tricks in there where they have a logarithmic bend, so there's less bend in the center of the action than if you're tilting it left or right. I prefer the method of Linnstrument because when you press on that, you've got tactile feedback. When you're pressing on something, it's very easy to hold your finger in place.
Right.
So I find it easier to use than a button that has tilt to it.
Okay, I've got you. So the surface of Linnstrument is actually flat. I mean, it looks like it's not, because presumably because of the way the lights are behind it, or is that am I making a supposition there? I've never touched one in the flesh.
No, it's completely flat, and what the surface consists of is it's a bunch of little drum pads actually. There's little. If I can put it up closer, maybe you can see it there better.
So, there's a slight right channel between them, so you've got you know where you are, kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a little dip of a half a millimeter between the note squares, so you can feel where you are, and then the light just comes from underneath this translucent silicon rubber surface. It shines through, but it's very flat, and when you press a note, it's very easy to hold that pitch. And if you want to vibrato it, you just wiggle your finger, and if you want to slide it, or in this case,
there we go. The slide.
You heard that, right?
Yeah, we did. It is kind of quiet. I mean, if you've got any more level in the room, that would be awesome. But yeah.
Well, actually, it's going through headphones. I could take the headphones off and then just listen to it acoustically.
Okay. Yeah, let's have another listen at that, because I love that slide.
Yeah, so here's, let me put the camera down again. So I'm holding a note. No, I'm going into bigger speakers. Here we go.
That's lovely. I think we're going to start getting
did
feedback.
You say something?
Yes, I.
Oh, now I'm not hearing your voice, Nick.
Okay.
Okay.
But I'm going to start coming out of your speakers now.
Okay. I can turn it down a little.
That sounded lovely. That really did sound lovely, and that whole kind of notion of the slide guitar is something that is. People can sort of appreciate how to play that. Do you find? I mean, how are you finding people that take this for the first time? Because I know you're working with Geert Beaven, who's a great kind of multi-touch exponent and an all-round kind of boffiny guy when it comes to sort of how to implement that. But he knows what he's doing. How do you find that people who don't kind of take to this? Presumably, you've sort of seen how that works. Have you found what are people kind of instantly gravitating towards when they first start using a Linnstrument?
Well, the interesting thing about it is when you've got this much expression, you don't need to play so much. And I find that when people come over and to play it, they actually grok it very easily. Let me just show you what I mean. And I'm actually being honest about this. I mean, I know I'm trying to eventually sell these things, but if I just play this, first of all, the lights are all the naturals. And then I can play them on multiple rows. But I just play the note and wiggle my finger. It's really very easy to translate any existing skills for vibrato from whatever instrument you play onto this, and people get it very easily. And the point I'm making is that when you've got that much expression, you don't need to play that much. You can actually play something very beautiful and very expressive with very few notes compared to what you'd have to do on a MIDI keyboard, because it just doesn't have those controls.
Have you found that there are other kind of byproducts of having an expressive thing? You say they're all little mini drum pads, effectively. Have you found there are sort of unexpected benefits to having a control surface laid out in this way and with the capabilities it has, other than just pure expression?
Well, I think obviously the expression is the main thing, but the side benefit of this grid layout over a piano key layout is that it overcomes one of the biggest problems of the piano layout. The piano layout is very, very easy to play as long as you're playing in C major or A minor.
Right.
And then it's easy because you're just playing on the white keys. But let's say the singer wants to play in C sharp major. You have to learn an entirely different fingering. Well, one of the things that keyboard players have always envied about guitar players is when you want to transpose, the guitar player just slides his hand up the neck, and the keyboard player has to learn an entirely new finger. So the thing that seems so easy about the piano keyboard layout, once you get into more complex music, makes it far harder to play. So what I try to do is to say, what is a better arrangement of notes than the piano keyboard that allows you to play in relative pitch as a guitar player did, and the string layout just seemed to make much more sense. And that but the thing that it would miss is the ability for it to be very accessible if you want to play just the white keys, and that's why I added the lights, because the lights tell you where all the naturals are. So if I want to play a scale, you just play where the lights are. So it kind of gives you the advantages of the piano keyboard, while also allowing you easy transposition. So I mean, I think the second benefit is this isomorphic layout.
Right, I gotcha. I guess the thing is
One thing I might,
oh yeah,
I'm
carry
sorry.
on. You carry on.
One thing I might add, Nick, is that if you decide that the keyboard is problematic because of these two problems. Number one, the problem of bending between notes, and the problem of not being isomorphic. What layout do you choose? And you really don't have many options. If you want an isomorphic layout, one that you can play the same chord in any key using the same fingerings, then all you've got really are grid or hex layout.
Yeah.
And hex layout you've seen, for example, at the
C3,
David's, the Sound of Music, Shape of Music, those controllers that come out of England, and the see-through keyboard. And the hex keyboard is very good, but if you think about it, all the hex keyboard is a grid layout with every other row shifted by 1/2 position, and then everything squished down, which turns them into hex keys.
Yeah, I mean, I personally find that really confusing, the hex key layout, but I'm starting to get my head around the grid. I think, as with all of these things, it's going to take application. So, I mean, to play with virtuosity or fluidity, you have to invest some time and effort into sort of getting it right. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think guitarists and string players will get it quicker, and then keyboard players maybe take a little bit longer because they have to translate their skills. But but honestly, when keyboard players come over to play it, they pick it up very, very quickly. Well, it's kind of like the continuum. If you're a keyboard player, when you approach a continuum, you just basically have to stretch the notes out so they're all equally spaced instead of as they are on a piano keyboard. And that's the same thing I'm doing here. But then if you take that idea of all the notes being equally spaced, instead of being in one long row, which also is a little bit difficult to look at both hands at the same time.
Sure.
I'm just taking 2-octave sections and overlapping them into multiple rows.
Well, perhaps that's something we can talk about in a second, about the layouts and the splits and what have you. But I think it's time now for my crass commercial interlude now. So if you'll excuse me for 1 second, I would just like to introduce our sponsor. And that is, let me just, there we go. iZotope, of course. If you're aware of iZotope, iZotope do sponsor our show on a regular basis. And we want to tell you a little bit about Break Tweaker. Break Tweaker is their It's made in conjunction with, designed by BT and developed by iZotope. Break Tweaker is not just a drum machine, it's a drum sculpting, beat sequencing environment that blurs the line between rhythm and melody. You can manipulate audio at a molecular level, reinvent the beat by controlling pitch, rhythm and texture at very high resolution. You can free yourself from traditional drum grids, create complex polyrhythmic beats with unique isorhythm and playback speed settings, which is very interesting. Experiment with stunning content, explore presets, drum samples, wavetables designed by top musicians, DJs, including BT. In fact, you get access to some of his very private and never seen before wavetables. You can craft the perfect drum sound, blend samples with synthesis to generate compelling hybrid sounds, and take control of your beats. All you have to do is go to iZotope.com/Break Tweaker. You should be able to get yourself a 10-day free demo. And of course, if you're a regular watcher of the show, you'll know that iZotope regularly give away, well, every week, frankly, a piece of software. And this week is iZotope's Break Tweaker. Of course, how could it be anything else? Obviously, we don't have announcing a winner for last week's show because I'm not sure exactly when this week's going to be. But if you want to win Break Tweaker, what you have to do is you get on Twitter and you need to use the hashtag. Now, this is going to be a bit of a mouthful. Morphing Wavetable. Which is part of the capabilities of Break Tweaker, and you want to send that at Sonic Nick and at iZotope Inc. And I will take a selection, take a slice and search to see who's mentioned it, and we take a random number and we pick that up, and the winner will be given a full copy of Break Tweaker as bestowed by the iZotope Fairy. So remember, what you have to do is you go to Morphing Wavetable. Sorry, you go to Twitter, you hashtag Morphing Wavetable to at Sonic Nick and at iZotope Inc. And then we will be able to figure out who won whenever the next week after this show is, if you get my drift. So sorry to be so random, but there's not really anything else we can do about that because it's not a live show this week because I've got my guest Roger Linn. So back to you, Roger. We were talking about the layout and the capabilities there, and so far the stuff that I've seen is has been quite one-handed. But you've got other modes, so you've got splitting and that sort of thing, so you can play even more polyphony. Is there a limit to how many? I guess 10 fingers maximum, but could you have more than one person play? What are the modes?
There's really no limit to the polyphony. So you could I suppose, having two people play at once. Just the nature of how the sensor design doesn't limit the polyphony. But, practically speaking, it's probably more of a single person instrument. At 10 fingers,
So how does the split mode work? You can presumably does it work on channels, or does it work? Let's have a look.
Well, basically, just press the split button to turn split on. And can you see the difference in colors there?
Yeah, there's sort of lilac and green.
Yeah, actually, let me just close these curtains so it makes it look darker.
Oh, yeah. That's it.
Yeah, that makes it a little bit easier to see. Yeah, at this point, this side of the keyboard is now green lights, and this is blue. And in each case, there's a light blue or cyan color that marks the C within each octave. So what I'm doing is I'm sending on one MIDI channel over here and a separate MIDI channel over here. Or I could have, multi-channel over here and different multi-channel over here. It's basically, you can configure the splits separately. And that allows you to do a different sound, like a keyboard sound here and a sax sound or something over here.
Uh-huh.
And I could actually hook that up, I suppose, to something.
Well, one thing I was curious about there. So if you're doing that, does it make? I mean, I'm guessing you have to. That's though. If you're working in split mode, that's when you're going to have to get your chops together a little bit. I mean, is there any reason why you couldn't go four ways? Sort of. So you've got a top, two tops, and two bottoms. I mean, is that the sort of thing that you can implement quite easily yourself?
Well, it's I didn't put a four-way split only because I don't want to make this too daunting. And, if you have a MIDI keyboard, normally people are used to a split keyboard, and what I'm trying to do is not make this some esoteric thing for weirdos.
Sure.
That people can approach very easily and immediately get it out of the box and make great sounds with. But one thing I want to mention is that I've gotten all kinds of great emails from people around the world who have special needs, and they're saying, "Can you put in this special feature for me? This special feature for me?" And I recognize that my resources are limited, and Garrett and I, Garrett's mainly doing the software now, picking up at a much faster pace than I did initially. But there's only so much we can put in. So what I decided to do is just give away the software for free as open source.
So people can mod it.
Yeah, what it is you're probably aware of the Arduino platform. Right?
Yeah, sure.
Well, there's one model of Arduino which is much faster. It's called the Arduino Duo, and it's based on a fast ARM chip.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we did is we based our circuit and our software all on the Arduino platform. So all somebody has to do if they want to modify our software is to go to the Arduino website, download the free editor, the IDE, and then connect it up to their Linnstrument via USB, and they select as their device the Arduino Duo, and then they go to our software repository, download all the complete Linnstrument software, load it into the Arduino editor, and modify anything they want, and then just upload it right into their Linnstrument, and they've made a new feature. Now, of course, everyone's not a software editor, but I suspect that within weeks of release, there will be people who are making new features in various ways, and then, of course, we will try to coordinate those so that those features are available to everybody.
So one thing I've seen on, I was looking at the manual and noticing that there was quite a lot of layout here where, for instance, you're using the lights as the display for setting certain things up as well. I mean, is that something that you're trying to maintain consistently, or will you need to have a software editor to kind of get the most out of it?
Well, actually, there's quite a few features here. The main ones are we have dedicated buttons. Like you can select the preset number by just holding preset and sliding your finger across, the number changes.
Yeah.
Or you can select the volume by moving your finger up and down, and a little volume bar, if you can see that, lights up or doesn't light. And then there's the octave transpose button, and you can change the octave to the left side change the octave for the right side, or change the transposition of the output, or change the transposition of the lights as they appear on the surface. And then there's a couple of auxiliary switches that you can set to anything you want. You could be sustain or CC65 or whatever. And then there's the split button where you turn the split on and off. By the way, if I just hold that and then move my finger, I change the split point.
That's nice.
So
People are
those are
you.
the main functions. But then there's lots and lots more. And one thing that may be hard to see in the light here is that printed on the top of the
Ah,
unit
yes, I see.
are a number of other parameters, and also on the bottom of the unit. And they're shown in 4 rectangles. And so, for example, if I press this button that says the per split settings, I see a number of rectangles with text printed in there.
I've
And
got
those
that
are
here.
functions indicated by the lights in the 4 cells just below that printing. So it's very intuitive and very easy to see. Oh, and I see you're showing it there. That's perfect.
Yeah, I managed to.
And so all those functions like bend range, MIDI channels, MIDI mode, whether the slides are on, quantization, um, uh, all the different functions that are used are printed there. And so there's quite a few functions, so it allows a great deal of customization. And by the way, anybody who goes to our website, they can download the user manual and see all the details of what those settings are.
Exactly. That's as I'm now demonstrating.
Yeah.
By my.
But then beyond that is where, and really we cover a tremendous amount of details right there. But beyond that is where, if somebody has a specialized application, they can rewrite the software to be however they want. And we also have a very nice feature too. If you add a feature and you would like to have different printing on the bottom, there's this wonderful company called Style Flip, and they make custom labels for products, including my MPCs. And so what we do is if anybody has a feature and they would like to have one of the unused printed areas in the bottom used for that feature, they can just call Style Flip and say, I'd like to have Linnstrument labels made with this text, and they'll make them up for very low cost.
Oh, that's neat. That's cute as well because it kind of takes the that whole notion of overlays and stickers and stuff that's been in the analog synthesizer world for quite some time. So a nice nod back there
Yeah.
to to the past, I guess. Very much in the future. So what's the kind of roadmap now? I mean, obviously this has been held up because of the touch surface. I mean, where are we in production? You know, what's your aim and goal to kind of get this out to market now?
Well, I'm ramping up slowly. I want to be able to catch any possible production problems early on. And my company is very small. Actually, you're looking at the whole company right now. It's just me. I have a lot of outsourced, like I use a manufacturer in San Francisco, and sometimes I'll bring in engineers to do certain work. And Garrett in Belgium is helping me very much. But other than that, there's nobody here right now. And although I will be taking on some employees, I don't have a lot of resources or
Sure.
money to be able to ramp up really fast. And so I'm going to be making, 10 units, then 25, and then we'll just see what the demand is. Right now, it looks like the demand will be very high, but it's hard to say.
And
But
when
at first, I want to just sell some direct here in the San Francisco Bay Area so that if there are any problems, I can get people to bring it over and swap out boards, things like that. And then after doing that for maybe a month, then do, 25 and then 50 and then take it up from there.
I suspect that those are very wise words from a man who has an inordinate amount of experience in the manufacture process, and may have, yeah. I mean, because there's nothing worse than pressing the button on a big run and then finding, oh, that, yeah, that sort of stuff is
Yeah.
just is pain. I mean, obviously, you've got other stuff on the go as well. I mean, Tempest is still in production, and
Yeah.
that's pretty. I mean, I reviewed that some time back. I think we were in communication then, and that's together with Dave Smith. Are you developing those products sort of simultaneously? I mean, because that's got an upgradable OS and what have you. I mean, do you find that you kind of continuously tinkering between products, or how do you like to focus your time?
Well, sometimes I can't focus my time. It's just so much work to do. And fortunately, what I've done is I've set up a lot of automated systems that handle things like order processing and information on the web. For example, on the website, I do all the tech support, and there are more than 11,000 Adrenalines out there. There's my Adrenaline Sync software, and there's other smaller products to make. And so on the website, I have all the FAQs on there, and I honestly try to answer everything as honestly as possible, including the warts. And I tell people, I say, I will answer your tech support, and I'm busy doing other things, so I'd appreciate it if you read the FAQs first or look in the manual.
Yeah.
And people are very respectful about that. But when they do ask a question, I tell them the truth. There may be a problem, and I say, no, that's a problem. It's my fault, but I'll help you out with it.
Excellent. I mean, nothing like the personal touch. I think that's something that's kind of often missed in many companies these days. So I guess the question is, when you're going to make 10, 20, whatever initially, what are you, when's that going to happen? I'm trying to try and nail you down here, Roger. You're going to have to give me a target that you're aiming for. I mean, obviously, I understand when you mention a date, it's difficult to be absolute about these things.
I understand that the need to give some sort of an estimate. I've been saying for a while now that I plan to ship in the fall, and that's accurate. I will be shipping greater numbers in the fall. At first, I will be selling only from the website for the first few months, only because everybody's coming to me anyway, and I just need the money to continue production.
Sure.
So I make more money if I sell direct than if I sell through a dealer. But I will be selling through dealers after that. And I would say probably dealers won't be there for Christmas sales, but after then, in January, something like that. But there will be sales on the website in the fall for direct sales.
Oh wow! Okay, that's something definitely to look forward to. And so, is this the model? I mean, are you planning on different versions of this? I mean, notice this one's got kind of wood end cheeks, and it's kind of got a nice high quality to it. Are you planning on other iterations once this technology is kind of smooth? I mean, because obviously this is quite a large surface area in terms of playing. I mean, there's scope for all sorts of ways of applying this technology elsewhere, I guess.
Well, I do plan to make different models. I do plan to make a shorter model. This model is 25 columns wide. I plan to make a smaller one that's 16 columns wide. And also, I plan to make ones with different note layouts. So some people would like to have a piano key layout. So I'm going to make one that has basically two manuals of smaller piano keys that
Okay.
are, and also I would like to make one with larger drum pads too. And so it would be for people that like to play drum pad as an interface. And basically, each drum pad would be the size of 4 of the Linnstrument pads, or the current Linnstrument pads. And so each of those I plan to make in a long version and a shorter version. And what I'd like to do too, I really like hex keys. So I'd like to make a version with hex keys as well.
Okay. So, and I guess that's all pretty straightforward. So is the sensor is the sensor technology in the actual material, or do you need to create? Are they actual sort of buttons with sensors around them? I mean, obviously, I'm not expecting you to give away any secrets, but I'm just curious to know how that aspect of it works.
Well, basically, the touch surface on top, the silicon rubber translucent surface, is just on top of the sensor. And the sensor is really the part of it, the part that's underneath.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very large and very expensive to fabricate. But it has to be made, each sensor has to be different for each key layout. So, for example, if I make a piano key layout, it has to be in that shape. If it's hex keys, it has to be in that shape. If it's drum pads, it has to be in that shape. And the other thing, too, because of the lights, the lights have to be placed in different positions, for example, for a hex layout or for the piano key layout. So it takes different circuit boards and different sensors in there. And each one of those costs a lot of money to fabricate and set up and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine. But it sounds like there's the interesting idea about the sort of larger, because I mean, obviously, the thing that you're known for, probably whether it's a cross or is your is the MPC, the layout of the MPC pads, and many people have, you've kind of enabled a whole genre of music to explode. I mean, many people say, that without the MPC, hip hop would never have been so meteoric in its rise, because there wouldn't have been the enabling technology for it. So I'm guessing a lot of people who are interested in what you do are those guys too. So that would make a lot of sense.
Well, yeah, and well, first I say that people have said that, but I'm sure hip hop would have happened the same with somebody else's technology, and I just got lucky that they happened to use mine. But yeah, it's amazing the creativity a lot of the drum pad players have shown in using the 4x4 grid layout, and it's and I want that's why I want to give them something they can use to use those skills. And one of the things that I'm actually very excited about is the drum pad layout of Linnstrument, because it'll have 48 drum pads, and all of which are sensitive to not only velocity and pressure, but X and Y axis movements. And I must say that there's a tremendous number of things you can do when you've got that many pads and they all have so much control for beat-oriented music. And I've got some ideas for that. For example, using that controller, the drum pad controller version of Linnstrument, with maybe an iPad app or something like that.
Interesting. And speaking of iPad apps, is it going to be class compliant? I mean, is it class compliant? I mean, what's the sort of nuts and bolts of that side of things, or is it going to need special drivers to interface?
No. The output of Linnstrument is purely class compliant MIDI, so it requires no software on the computer whatsoever except your sound generation software. And so you can play USB. But, it's also got MIDI jacks. I don't know if you can see it here.
Oh yeah.
But I've got MIDI in and out, and then I've got USB. But of course, the USB is going to send the MIDI much faster than the MIDI jacks, which is kind of nice considering if you're playing 10 fingers, you've got 30 streams of continuous data.
Yeah, I mean, that's always, I mean, because the MIDI port itself, I mean, back in the day when we were all using Ataris or kind of low-powered computers, just the presence of aftertouch or pitch bend could clog up and cause problems with beats, which I'm guessing is possibly one of the reasons why hip-hop guys love the MPC, because it had multiple output ports and it was just sort of rock solid timing. So that makes an awful lot of sense. I mean, have you been tempted to kind of adopt any other like OSC or any of the other transports for the output of this, or is that something that would be relatively straightforward to implement?
Well, OSC is wonderful. For those who don't know, OSC is Open Sound Control. It's a protocol created right down the street from me at the University of California, Berkeley, here in Berkeley, where I live. And it's marvelous. And it allows, instead of the limitations of 7-bit MIDI, you've got 32-bit floating point. However, as much as I love it, it's not widely accepted. And given that MIDI does do everything that Linnstrument wants to do, I figured that it's better to have to use the existing standard, which all synths work with. But and we haven't implemented OSC. That's one of the first things I think someone's going to do with the open source software.
Oh, right, so they can do that. Okay.
Is to implement an open sound control implementation.
And I guess the other thing is everybody's doing it as well. A bit of control voltage output somewhere along the line. I suppose that might be difficult if you're powering it over USB, but that's been something that's quite interesting. I noticed that certainly Akai, even on the I think it's the Max 49 and various, and lots of people are putting I think Arturia as well, CV outputs as well. So you get this this direct connection with the analog world. I mean, is that something that is of interest or relevant perhaps to this?
Well, one of the problems is if you want to be able to have 10 fingers of control, that means there'll be 30 output jacks.
That's true.
So it makes it a little bit difficult. So what we do is we just put out the USB and the MIDI, and then you can connect that to any MIDI to analog box, and then use that as you wish. And you can choose a small one, or you can choose one with many outputs, or as many as you want.
Right. So, well, Roger.
And one thing I want to add to that is
that
the instrument's only about 5.5 pounds, and one of the reasons is it's very, very thin. It's only 1 inch thin, and so there's only so many jacks you can put on there.
I noticed you've got a couple of guitar strap points on there, and indeed one of the videos that you were that you posted yourself, which was using Logic. You were sort of wearing it, as it were, as a sort of strap-on thing. I mean, does that struck me as a little bit perhaps difficult to play? I mean, how do you find it in that respect? Is there anything that you can do to kind of make that easier? Because you're gonna hurt your neck after a little while, surely.
Yeah, it's a little bit like playing the Chapman stick.
Ah, yeah.
Where you're holding it kind of Bill Wyman style, and you use your fingers on both sides. In the same way you would play a stick, or you'd play maybe an accordion, or you'd play anything where you have hands approaching from both sides. You tend to play it at an angle like this. But I could see in the future having a model which has maybe less notes and is a little bit thinner. But at only 5.5 pounds, that's less than many
Yeah,
guitars.
it doesn't weigh much at all, so that's not so much a problem. The other thing is in terms of the MIDI ports, effectively the USB ports. Do you have like one available, or can you split them out? Because I know some instruments have, so you'd have a note output, a control output, so you can address multiple MIDI ports. It makes it sometimes easier to route between software instruments within a DAW environment.
Well, there was only one MIDI output and one MIDI input, and currently there's only one MIDI port on in the USB jack. So it all goes through one port, but it's I guess my thinking is that you've got the assignability, so you rarely use more than 16 channels on one port, and since you've got the speed there anyway, there's no need for it to overcome the speed limitations. So while some people might say it's a convenience to have a separate MIDI jack or multiple MIDI ports, I guess I just didn't really see the need for it. It's possible we could change that in a future update.
I suppose that's true, isn't it? I mean, it's just us old school guys are thinking, oh, well, you've got to have a dedicated MIDI port because it'll get clogged up. But yeah, you're right. Over USB, it's really no issue whatsoever, right?
Well, and plus, because of the high volume of data that's spit out of this thing, the MIDI port is better because it goes quite a bit faster. Excuse me, the USB port is a more efficient transport mechanism for MIDI than the slower MIDI jacks.
Right, gotcha. Well, Roger, I think we're probably getting towards an hour of chat, which has been absolutely fantastic. I really appreciate you joining us at what must be an early time over there on the East Coast and a late time here. That's the time difference. But we wish you the very best of luck with this. Have you got any idea of pricing? I mean, have you kind of fixed pricing for this kind of thing? I didn't ask that, did I? I suppose I should.
It's going to be $1,500.
Right. Okay. So that's a little bit less than perhaps the rumours had. So that's great. So people will be very pleased. And if you're in the UK, the dollar to UK pound price is well in your favour at the moment.
Yeah.
Excellent. So Roger, thank you very much for joining us. Wish you the best of luck with the Linnstrument. If you want to see what Roger's up to, you just go to Roger Linn Design and keep an eye out. And also on Sonic State, obviously, we'll keep news of it. Roger, you look like you wanted to add something there.
Oh, only that we didn't get a chance to play any of the sounds, really. So if let people know that on the site there's a number of videos, so they can hear and see the Linnstrument being played.
Absolutely, and I think that would probably be better because over the limitations of Skype and what have you, you're going to get a much better representation of what the Linnstrument could do. In fact, one of the reasons we're here is because there's a great video played. In fact, I could play a little bit of it now with I think is this the Gert Bevan one? No, perhaps it's not. I don't have it lined up. But that have been posted by Roger himself and by Gert, who, again... Oh, that's not it. That's the wrong one. So, but I'll put the links in the show notes and you can check that out. But once again, we thank Roger very much for joining us. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I know at trade shows, it's always a mad environment, but it's invariably where we do bump into each other.
Well, thank you very much, Nick, for helping me spread the word. And it's good to talk to you. It's been a while.
Great. Okay, and that's it for Sonic Talk number 371, I think it might be. I'm not sure yet, but you'll see in the notes what the title is because I don't know when this is going to go out. But thank you very much for watching. And once again, don't forget, if you want to have the chance to win iZotope Brake Tweaker, you need to go here and tweet out the hashtag morphing wavetable to @SonicNick and @iZotope Inc. And then you can win one and it'll all be great. So, once again, thank you very much. And Roger, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day over there in sunny California. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Nick. Bye now.